21st, 2020. This is a special budget meeting, and we're doing it for the first time on Zoom. So we want it to be as interactive as possible. I'll explain to you all how we're going to do that. But as I would like to introduce you, I have with me today, we have Councillor Dita Burku, Councillor Mike Cohen, Councillor Stephen Erdely, whose portfolio is finance and will be doing the presentation tonight, Councillor Cindy Benizri, Councillor Mitch Kajavsky, Councillor Oren Sabag, and Councillor David Torchman, and myself, Mayor Brownstein. And we have staff with us. We have our City Clerk, Jason Prevost. We have the City Manager, Tanya Bramvich, Co-City Manager, Jonathan Schechter, and Associate City Manager, Nadia DeFuria. Now, how we're going to do this today is there's a first question period. If you have any questions, you can post them in the chat and we will answer them. As well, we're going to be doing a presentation on the budget, and Councillor Erdely is going to be doing that presentation, and you'll be able to post questions in the chat, but we're not going to see those. Our City Clerk, Jason Prevost, will be seeing them. We don't see them. It's very difficult for us to see everything that's going on, but our City Clerk will be seeing those. And what he's going to be doing is at the appropriate time, either sending over the questions or asking those questions to Councillor Erdely, or Councillor Erdely has another screen and a document shared with myself and the City Clerk, where we're going to be monitoring anything that's being posted in that document and trying to answer those questions during the presentation. However, if they're not answered during the presentation, Maître Prevost will make sure that they're answered at the end, even though there's no second question period. It's a little exceptional that we're doing this by Zoom, and we want to find a way where we can answer all questions. So you can post in the chat. Our City Clerk is monitoring it, and so is Councillor Erdely, and I will also be doing my best to try to make sure that we don't miss anything, and that's the way it's going to go. So we're going to do our presentation as we do it every year, and I'm very pleased, first of all, and I want to congratulate and thank our City Treasurer, Angelo Marino, for an excellent budget and managing our funds well during this very difficult year where we were in a pandemic and our revenues had to be reduced in certain areas because we offered services, particularly recreation services, for free, where we had some additional expenses due to COVID. But yet, with the assistance, as Councillor Erdely will explain, of the provincial government funds that were sent over to all municipalities, we're able to have a balanced budget with a 0% increase for the average family residence, which includes duplex and single family home. So that's all good news, and I'll let Councillor Erdely start with the presentation, and we'll try to answer all questions as we go through the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to begin first by echoing some of the Mayor's points with regard to our Treasurer, Angelo Marino. As the Mayor mentioned, this was not a simple year. Probably the toughest, I would say the toughest for me as a city councillor, and I dare to say the toughest for the city in the 100-year plus history of the city as well. But I'm really grateful to the hardworking team, again, starting with our treasurer, the finance department, I want to thank the directors and the city councillors as well for really coming together, not just to keep an eye on the budget for 2020, but in careful planning for the budget for 2021. And as the Mayor mentioned, I will try to answer questions. I have in front of me a few screens, so I apologize. I'll be sort of kind of looking at different screens. So if I'm not looking right at the camera, it's because I'm looking at one of my other monitors to make sure that I'm able to follow along. So I will put up the presentation, and just to mention, the already on the city's website, if you go to cotesaintluc.org/finance, you will see the operating budget, the draft budget, and this presentation will, if it's not already posted, I have to admit I didn't have a chance to check in the last hour or so, but if it's not already posted, it will be posted later this evening on the city website, so residents will be able to follow along. Je vais faire la présentation en anglais, mais s'il y a des questions, vous pouvez demander en français. I'll make the presentation in English, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them in English or French. So as mentioned, today we'll be presenting both the operating budget and the capital budget. So the operating budget is for the year 2021. The capital budget, we generally do 3 years, although at some point we are looking at expanding to 4 or 5 years. So flip to the next slide. So I'll give a summary of the presentation of what we're going to see in the next, let's say, half hour or so. So first, we're going to go over the budget building process, the guiding principle. So I'll give an overview of the budget. I'll go over some of the details, including what is local and agglomeration. So these are points that we bring up every year as reminders. We'll talk about the revenues and expenses. We'll go over the tax rates. And the tax rates, just to mention tonight, we'll be giving a notice of motion for the tax rates, and those will be officially adopted on Wednesday, December 23rd at 6:30 p.m. I'll talk about the priorities for this year for 2021 and give a very brief overview of the plan for 21, 22, and 23. And just to mention the way it works, we adopt, like I said, a 3-year plan, although we adjust that 3-year plan every year. And the priorities right now, of course, are on the projects that will be committed or be done in the year 2021. And again, questions, like I said, I have on my other screen, as the mayor mentioned. So if someone posts a question on the YouTube site, I'll see if I can answer it as I'm talking. Otherwise, I'll be answering them at the end of the presentation. So to go through the timeline, so if we start towards the top, we began reviewing in June in terms of the budget forecast, where we are in 2020. And again, for the current year, 2020, we did multiple different scenarios. The treasurer worked out, different scenarios on reopening and closing based on COVID restrictions. We looked at the guiding principles in July. In September, we looked at things like the salaries and fixed contracts. October, we started preparing the documents for 2021. November, we finalized and reviewed the capital projects. And then we looked at the draft budget, tax rates, and to where we are today, to December 21st, where hopefully we'll approve the budget, which will be voted on after the presentation. So in terms of guiding principles for the budget, most of these are very similar to year. The key difference is the first one. And the first one is an important one. Our primary principle this year was to freeze the taxes for the average residential home. And this is the average of a house, a condo, or townhouse. And the reason we felt this was necessary was in light of the financial difficulties or financial stress that many of our residents have had because of COVID-19. We felt it important to keep the tax rate at a 0 increase. We also were, as the mayor mentioned, able to do this thanks to a grant we received from the provincial government of approximately $3 million. And I'll be talking about that a bit later on in the presentation. But just to go over some of the other principles, which are the same year to year generally, ensure we have a balance of revenues and expenses so that the budget is balanced in the end. Ensure in terms of property tax that we can minimize the increase, let's say in terms of taxes and additional tax burden for residents while maintaining our services. And long-term viability of our services. So we want to make sure that they are there and will be there to last. We want to try to optimize external grants, whether it be from the federal government or provincial government, and we're continuing to work on that for different projects, and ensure that we can use our internal sources of funding for capital projects. So this is what we call our working fund. So what the city did about 12 years ago was we set up a working fund where we took some of the surplus and we allocated to a special fund we used to fund small projects, so small and medium-sized projects. And the goal of this is so that we don't have to borrow money. We are in fact borrowing money from ourselves. And of course, when you borrow from yourselves, you don't have to pay interest. So it saves money for the city. Just to finish off the guiding principles, ensure there are funds available for ongoing operating costs. And of course, following when there's upgrades or new construction. So for example, we need to make sure we have enough funds to maintain our buildings. This year, you've seen with the City Hall complex, we are finishing the last phase of the building envelope. We've done a lot of work on the arena. We've done work, we will be doing more work on public works yards, on some of the bricks in building envelope for some of our other buildings, including the arena. We'll talk a bit more about that later. And ensure that when there are new services that they benefit the residents as a whole, and ensure efficiency and transparency. One of the things we've been trying to do over the last few years to share more information with residents. And if you go to our city website, cotesaintluc.org/finance, again, you'll be able to see more information on the budgeting process, not just this year, but going back a few years. In terms of local versus agglomeration, so the taxes that residents pay cover both of these, but the local includes things like the local administration, public works, so it includes things like our road repairs, waste management, so that's our recycling, organic waste, and garbage or refuse, public safety, security, EMS, recreation, library, ACC, and debt service, and the CMM, which is the Communauté Métropolitaine de Montréal. On the agglomeration side, although we don't pay for it directly, it is paid through the agglomeration fees. So this includes the police, fire, the municipal court, evaluations, public transportation, so the STM, water treatment on a city level, 911, and social housing. So these are some of the different services. And again, for Côte Saint-Luc residents, they pay into Côte Saint-Luc, and then we pay what we call our Côte Part, or our disbursement to the agglomeration. So I'll go through some of the key points in terms of overview. So this is the second year of our tax roll or valuation roll. So the new one came into effect on January 1st, 2020. So this is the second year. It'll continue until December 31st, 2022, and then there'll be a new 3-year roll. The increase in revenue is about in municipal tax revenue is 1.24%. And the reason it is not zero is there are 2 points. One, because of the apartment buildings. Now the apartment buildings generally had a larger than average increase. However, what the city did this year is we reduced the ratio from 1.192 to 1.19. So we reduced the ratio slightly to basically help some of the apartment buildings because they were seeing significant increases, and some of the non-residential properties saw an increase as well. So that generates a 1.24%. So now to switch to an average residential home. So this includes a house, a condo, and a townhouse. So the average increase for those properties was 14.2%, and that is over the 3 years of the roll. And for anyone who is at the average, they would have a 0% increase, and we'll see a bit later. It worked out to about, just because of the percentages and when we're factoring the mean, median, and mode, so it worked out to about 49.8% of residential properties, residential homes, I should say, are seeing either a decrease or a 0% increase. And of course, slightly 50.2 are seeing a slight increase based on, again, the way the averages worked. New this year is a $50 tariff for black bins. So this is something we'll be sharing more information with you in January and in the spring. But in the year 2021, every home, so that includes houses, that includes duplexes and some townhouse structures, depending on how your waste is done, will receive a black bin, and you'll have an option of different sizes, of 2 different sizes. So that's $50, a $50 tariff, which is actually not even enough to cover the bin. Part of it is being covered by the redevance, which we'll talk about a bit later, which is a grant from the provincial government. And for duplexes, the fee will be $100 with the assumption that the duplexes will get 2 bins. So 2 bins for each duplex. The total increase in net taxation revenue is 1.61. So this is because we reduced some of the provisions, including the provision for contestation. So last year being the first year in the roll, we had a larger amount for contestation. This year we've decreased it because most of the contestations have been finalized, and in the end, generally, it's somewhere in the middle in terms of the final amount that was decided. So we've reduced the amount. Other revenue increase is 1.72, and the total increase in the budget, including the AGLO, works out to about a 3.66%. And again, I'll talk a bit more later about a grant that we received from the provincial government, which all cities on the island of Montreal have received. In Côte Saint-Luc's case, it was just under $3 million. And the purpose of this is to offset COVID costs and some of the extra expenses for the agglomeration, or the extra Côte part. So again, as mentioned, the average increase was 14.2 for residential homes. If you factor in residential properties, which includes the apartment buildings, it works out to 14.8. But you can see some of the numbers. The single family homes were slightly higher at 17.1. The condos were lower at 8.2. Duplexes also slightly lower, 11.4. And apartments 6+ had the highest increase of 19.7. And for non-residential properties, so this includes, for example, the shopping centers. It includes, for example, CP Rail. The average was 7.8%. And just to note the tax increase, what we did this evaluate based on this 3-year evaluation roll, it was we spread it over 3 years. So if a home, let's say, increased by 15%, the increase would have been roughly 5% per year. But as mentioned, we try to offset that. So generally, when there's an increase in the evaluation roll, we decrease the mill rate or the tax rate, and you'll see that in the next slide or two. So just to reiterate, so in terms of the increase, so 14.2, the average single family house is evaluated now at 692,000. The average single family condo or townhouse is at 377,000. So, and we factor that in terms of a weighted average, we get $545,000, which is the average family home or residential home. So if we base that on where it was on January 1st, it was $477,200. The increase is $67,800. If we divide it over 3, it works out to about $22,600. So right now we are at year 2. So for year 2, that would be at $522,400. So that is the average evaluation in the second year of the roll. And I'll show how that would work. So this is now for an average residential home. So again, this includes houses, condos, and townhouses. So you can see here in 2020, it was $499,800. This year it increased by $22,600 to $522,400. So the tax rates are slightly lower. So the tax rate went from 1.0922 to 1.0448. But basically what that means is we decrease the mill rate at the same rate as the increase. So an average residential property or average residential home, I should say, would have a net increase of $0 or 0%. And this is what, like I said, about half of the residents will see either 0 or slight decrease. Now, the next slide is going to be in terms of an average house. So the average house, as mentioned, was slightly higher because they had an increase averaging about 17.1 over versus the 14.2, so a slightly higher increase. So they would see, just to get to the final line, the bottom line. So an average residential house or an average house would see an increase of $55 or 0.8%. And again, it's based on each property being different, each home being different, and the information is available. Anyone who wants can look on, of course, they're on their tax bills. You can also go to Eval Web, and if you search that on the internet, you can find your evaluation of your house currently and the previous, and it's very quick calculation to figure out the percentage increase. I'll keep going now to our revenues. So in terms of overall revenues, so in terms of revenue from taxation, we have $65,129,520. So this is from all the tax, and this is to cover both the local and agglomeration. The local improvement tax, so this is just a small amount, and this is linked to Cavendish Mall, work that was done at Cavendish Mall many years ago, and some of the homes in the vicinity. So that's $104,000. $240,000, that is the estimated revenue from the black bin. So if you do the rough math, it's about at $50 a bin, it works out to, it's just under 5,000 black bins that the city will be purchasing, that the city will be receiving funds for in terms of revenue. And compensation LEO taxes is roughly the same as last year. And this is to cover the federal and provincial government buildings. So the post office, as mentioned, the post office, the schools, Mount Sinai, Maimonides, hospitals, and any provincial or federal government property. Other revenue is from a series of different things, which we'll talk about in a few moments. But overall, an increase in revenue of 1.72%. And then in terms of estimated revenue from taxes, so if we look, as mentioned, the revenue from residential properties, residential homes is actually slightly down, but again, that's based on an average increase of $0. So it's virtually even from 2020 to 2021. The apartments is up because, like I said, the average increase for the apartments was close to 20% over the 3-year roll. And even though we adjusted the rates slightly, it's still an increase for those apartments. Vacant land is also down, partly because there's less vacant land in the city, as some of the few remaining spots have been developed in the last year or two. Non-residential properties is up slightly. Water reserve is roughly the same. This is to cover the costs of maintaining the water system and water infrastructure, and some of the money from the water reserve, and I'll be talking about this a bit later, is being allocated to funding for lead testing in the year 2021 and 2022. In terms of the municipal tax provision, so this is for contestation. So we originally had it at $160,000 as it was the first year of the roll. Because most of those contestations have been resolved, there's only a handful remaining. We've reduced the contestation amount to $50,000, and my hope is those will be resolved very shortly. In terms of revenue for local improvement, so the $104,000 is from Cavendish Mall, work done in the vicinity of Cavendish Mall. The $240,000 is for the black bins, and this, just to mention, is a one-time expense, similar to those who may recall about 10 years ago what we did with the purchase of blue bins. So at the time, it was also a one-time expense done very, very similarly. And again, more information will be shared in the upcoming months. Residents will have the option to choose. If they don't, there'll be a default size, but they have the option to choosing a smaller size as well if they would like that. And just to mention, the goal long-term is try to reduce the amount of waste. In Côte Saint-Luc, we've managed to virtually triple the amount of waste that's diverted, and we've reduced the amount of waste going to landfill by about 33%, and the goal is to continue doing that over the upcoming years. In terms of other revenue, the biggest item, so we have increases and decreases. So I'll start with the ones that are decreases. So we're estimating decrease in revenue in some of the items or some of the facilities that are open to the public or possibly are offering less services because of COVID-19. So for example, the ACC, the library, recreation and culture, we are estimating less revenues. We're also estimating less for permits and licenses. There seems to be less people doing renovation or less major construction or building. We also have seen, and we will be seeing, a decrease in fines, mostly because of the police who have been focused on COVID-19 and less on, from what we've seen, on traffic infractions. So that means less revenue for the city. In terms of the largest increase, it is with regard to the property transfer duties. So this is one, so property transfer, this is a welcome tax that every resident has to pay when they purchase a new home or new property. What we've seen in the last few years is we've been under budgeting in this one, and we've been able to benefit from increased sales this year. Even in 2020, I have to admit, we thought that there was going to be a decrease in this, that we weren't going to hit the $2.8 million that was budgeted. For several months, the housing sales were quite low because there were no open houses or minimal number of open houses, but it did pick up in the second half of the year. So even in 2020, we see ourselves hitting that number and possibly, and this number being a part of the reason there will be a surplus in the year 2020. So those are the big anomalies. In terms of the government transfer, so we'll talk about this on the next slide, and I'll go into more detail about that. So overall, in terms of other revenues, a slight increase of 2.55%, but the biggest item is in terms of the property transfers or welcome tax. So I'll talk now about government grants. So this is this is a slide we added a few years ago. And you'll see some of the different grants the city is able to acquire. And as mentioned in the priorities, one of the things we are trying to do, one of our goals is to try to be able to get more money through grants from both the provincial and federal government. In this case, most of them are from the provincial government. So we have the redevance, which is for waste. So the more we recycle in Côte Saint-Luc, the more we recycle, the more waste is diverted to organic waste or composting. We get more money through redevance from Receipt Quebec. We also get money for library books of approximately $60,000 a year. There's also the Ministry of Finance interest on provincial portion of long-term debt. So this is, for example, for the ACC or other times the provincial government gives us a grant. They usually pay us in about 20 years, but they do give us the interest that we would be paying ourselves if we were borrowing the money. And then you have the redevance deferred revenue. So that is for the black bins. So the city is using the part of the redevance money that had been deferred from previous years to cover the cost. Go on to the next slide. So this is a breakdown of the revenue in terms of a pie chart. The biggest item, as has been the case in Côte Saint-Luc, since before I was a councillor, was obviously revenue from taxation, accounts for just over 86.5%. You have local improvement, which is a very small amount, tariffs for black bins, also small compensation LIA, around 2%, and other revenue makes up about 11%. So again, the largest amount being from taxes. In terms of expenses, this is quite a general spreadsheet, and then I'll go to the next one where the next few will go into more details. But we see an overall increase in expenses of about 2.79%. Our goal, as mentioned, is to continue to offer the services and to try to expand upon them. And this year there's some new hires, and I'll talk about in a few minutes, in public works, for example, where we're trying to continue to raise the bar and improve the services we offer our residents. So I'll go through the next few slides and try to share some of the key points. So in terms of the agglomeration, so our apportionment this year is for the general Côte Par is roughly 25.2 million. If we look at, for example, the water services, there's a slight increase. However, if we look, for example, at the cost of water, so the water services is based on our evaluation. The cost of water is based on our consumption. So we can see the cost of water is actually a 3% decrease. And part of that is because of all the pipe sleeving that we've done, and all those. There's a slide later on that shows the number of meters and the percentage decrease in water main breaks. But because of that, we've managed to reduce the amount of water that is wasted in the network. And by doing that, we've managed to reduce the amount of water that we're using, that Côte Saint-Luc residents and Côte Saint-Luc as a whole is consuming. And so saving money there. The total increase is about 944,000. And what we've done this year is we've used that. So of the 3 million grant, we're using about $1.4 million this year. Of that 944,000 is to cover the increase of the agglomeration this year. And this is one of the things that several of the cities are doing, several of the other demerged cities are doing. So we're offsetting that increase using this $3 million grant from the provincial government and should try to minimize the increase for our residents. In terms of local expenses, or general expenses, so we have, just checking my notes, okay. So most of the items are generally comparable with one or two outliers. So I would say the main outlier is the undistributed administration expenses, where we see a significant increase of about $300,000. And the two portions are the two main pieces that are making up that increase. One is the general election expense. So the city has budgeted an increase of $225,000. We've budgeted, I believe, in total about $250,000, $275,000 for the election. We estimate it's going to cost even more than a normal election because of COVID measures that may have to be taken, that may have to take place. We're hoping by the time the election comes that everyone will be vaccinated, but just in case. And we're also doing a public consultation on the urban planning master plan for the city. And this is to look at the city as a whole and see how we can be more efficient in terms of zoning and moving forward on this front. And that's an expense of roughly $100,000. So those are, I would say, that's the main point, and those are the two reasons. You can see some, even there's some that are slightly decreased, and that's what generates the 4.76% increase on this item. To go through the rest of the expenses for EMS, VCOP, public security, we see a slight increase of 2.68%, and the largest part of that is on building maintenance. The 8100 facility is Côte Saint-Luc Road is getting a bit older, so we're trying to put more focus on maintaining that building. In terms of public works, so here I would say we probably see, this is where we see the largest increase in the budget. So what we've done in terms of the administration for public works, we've created 2 new positions and have 2 positions that are transferred from recreation. So just to give a sense in terms of the positions that have been transferred or created, we have a manager of operations for parks and the environment that'll work in conjunction with our current manager of operations, who'll be in charge of buildings and fleet. We also have a waste and recycling technician. We have a foreman for the arena and a supervisor for outdoor sports. So again, 2 of these positions are newly created. 2 of them are transferred from recreation. And this is something that we discussed to try to make the city more efficient, to make sure that we are meeting the needs of our residents and that we can continue to offer the level of service that Côte Saint-Luc residents expect. In terms of some of the other items, we see a small increase in road services as we're trying to do more patchwork as well on the road. Snow removal slightly up, although we'll see how it goes. We've been lucky, I have to say, in the last few weeks in terms of just having mild snowfall. So hopefully that will continue into 2021 as well. I'll keep going on to the next slide. So in terms of environmental services, so the first item, the water distribution debt service. So this is one we are almost done. I remember when I was elected back in 2005, this was a 20-year term that we were paying back to the agglomeration for water services. So we are down to about 4 years left on this loan, on this debt service. So this will be done within the next few years. We have water distribution for general, and a new item you'll see this year is for lead. So this is partly amount for testing drinking water. So the goal is over the next 2 years, over 2021 and 2022, to test about 3,200 homes for lead and to work on an action plan in terms of removing the lead from the pipes in Côte Saint-Luc, from the service lines in Côte Saint-Luc. In terms of garbage removal, this year we see a large increase there as well. The city went to tender, and this is one of those things where some years are better than others. So we went to tender for waste removal, and the cost was up significantly. We're hoping that next time we go to tender, the cost will come down a little bit, but that's one of the realities of the tendering process. So we had the last few years gotten a better rate. For 2021, the rate was a bit more expensive. And there's also, I should mention, a cost for the distribution of the bins, which again will be taking place in the spring of 2021. So just to reiterate for the lead, so the goal originally was to do the water testing over 1 year, but what happened was well, I would say 2 things happened. One, COVID made things more complicated as residents and individuals did not necessarily want, and I have to admit, I can understand this, didn't want strangers, so to speak, who would be, of course, working for the city, but didn't want outside people coming in their house. And also the government changed the way the testing must occur. It used to be you could let the water run and then do the test. Now you actually have to not have the water running for several minutes before doing the test. So the process takes that much longer. So we'll be doing the testing over 2 years. We've also instituted we've also, well, I should say we already had a water rebate program for filters. We added a second set to that, which would be rebate of $200 for those that have a reverse osmosis system. These are generally the larger systems that are going under your sink. So that's a $200 rebate. And we're also working on an action plan long-term. We know this is not something that can be solved overnight, but the goal is to try to do as much as we can over the next few years to solve the issue of lead in our pipes. In terms of local expenses with regard to recreation, culture, and ACC, so this is down slightly for a few reasons. One, as mentioned, there was a transfer of 2 positions from recreation to public works. One of those is under the administration, and one of those I believe is under the ACC, or was under the ACC heading in previous years. We also realized that there will be less use of some of our city facilities, at least for the first half of the year, again, because of COVID-19. So we're estimating less revenue and also less expenses. So that's why we see overall a decrease of 1.39% for recreation, culture, and the aquatic and community center. I'm just checking my notes. Oh, and one, before I forget, one highlight, one that I'm excited about, where there is actually a slight increase, because most of the items are down, is for skating rinks. So this has been, if I recall this, if you go back to 2006, the first action of the council when I was elected for the first time was to have the skating rink at Schwartz Park return. It had been taken away during the agglomeration years, during those years from 2001 to 2005 for budgetary reasons. It was reinstated in 2006, and that was one of the first actions of the council post demerger. This year, we've expanded the number of outdoor skating rinks, in addition to Trudeau Park and the annex and the pond. And of course, Schwartz Park, we have Fletcher Park, and we have, I'm just thinking, I'm forgetting the other ones, but I will come back to this in a moment. I see some of the face of my fellow councilors. Sorry,
Guelph, Rembrandt, Singerman, Fletcher, and Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So again, one of the highlights is to have more outdoor skating rinks. We hope the weather will cooperate. I know I believe the annex is up and running. I know Schwartz Park I just went to last night. It's still not quite there, but hopefully with a few more cold days, we'll have outdoor skating for everyone. And they'll be able to do it safely and of course, maintaining a safe distance while they're doing it. In terms of library, and in terms of the library, there's a slight increase, but a minimal increase of 0.9% for the library budget. To go on to finish off or to continue with the local expenses in terms of debt service and financing costs. So for capital repayments, a slight increase, and this generally has to do with the timing. The way the city works, usually we borrow money, even if it's a project that is financed over 10 or 20 years, we usually borrow in 5-year increments. So the increase sometimes has to do with the timing of our loans. The CMM is up slightly. The provision or system reserve, we reduced from 100,000 to 50,000. Part of the reason was there are funds in the surplus as well. So in case we needed additional funds, we can always use that. But an increase of 2.95%, but again, largely because of the capital repayments, which are up, which has to do more of a timing issue in terms of when the bonds come up. To keep moving, so in terms of other various appropriations, so the working fund, this is a fund, as I mentioned earlier on, where the city borrows money from itself to reduce the interest costs and borrowing costs. So that's roughly the same. One of the big difference is the $1.445 million from surplus, and I'll talk more about that on the next slide. We have $300,000 from the water reserve, which is going to be used to offset some of the costs of lead testing, and $64,000 for the pension fund, and this is based on I believe this is still a holdout from the 2008-2009 stock market. I don't know if I'd say crash, but reduction that we've been paying over the last 10, 12 years, and will continue to be paying for a few more years. So an increase, but largely because of the surplus, which we'll talk about on the next slide. So to reiterate, the city got a grant of just under $3 million from the provincial government. What we've decided to do is use about 45% of this money, so 1.345 million in this year, and the remainder to be used next year to cover additional costs. So 944,000 is to offset the increase in terms of the agglomeration apportionment or quote par. 376,000 is to cover the revenue shortfall, and this is due to COVID-19, that less services, city services are being used, less people are using the arena and the pool and recreation facilities and programs, and 25,000 is for an expected increase in the expenses due to COVID-19. For a total of 1.345. We also have taken $100,000 that was originally reserved for insurance premiums and deductibles and put that into the surplus and are adding that back into the budget for a total of 1.445. The 100,000, just to mention, was put there because for several years in the, let's say, the 2005 to 2010 period, the city had a significant number of water main breaks. And we had a lot of issues with insurance, with our insurers at the time. We reduced the amount of breaks by about, I believe it's about 61%, which is a significant number. So we haven't needed that money, and now we can reallocate it back to surplus. So just to give a summary, so this total expenses in summary, when you factor in after you factor in the apportionment from the surplus, works out to $75.3 million. And you have the breakdown, and I'll show that in a pie chart so you can see it. So we have, again, 17.3 from general administration. You have public works at 14%, and the agglomeration, the largest one, at 39%. So summary, again, of the operating budget. So 75 million in total, 47 million is roughly for the local expenses, 29 million for the agglomeration or the city's central services, and totaling again 75.3 after factoring the apportionment from the surplus. And now just review one more time the tax rates. So as mentioned, generally you'll see the tax rates are all down. Because what we did is, as the evaluation went up, we reduced the tax rates accordingly. So for the average residential home, there would be virtually a 0% increase. And so these are the rates. And again, this will be on your tax bill. So ranges from, so for a residential property, 0.9966 plus the water for a total of 1.0448. And then you see the subcategories. So what the City of Côte Saint-Luc did, and this is the second year, is we, as we were given permission to from the provincial government, made subcategories. So you have the reference subcategory. Then you have our shopping mall, which is has to do with the 3 large shopping centers in Côte Saint-Luc, the office towers, and then the railway subcategory. And again, this is a review of the earlier slide. So an average increase for single family homes or single residential homes at $0 or 0%. And I'm happy to be able to do that this year, especially given that we know it's not an easy year for many residents. And so just to shed more light on what I mentioned earlier, so 49.8% we'll see a 0% increase or reduction. 12.4% we'll see an increase just above 0 to 0.5%. 16.6 between 0.5 and 1. 14.7 between 1 and 2%, and just a small percentage at 6.5% we'll see an increase over 2%. And these are for homes that had a significant increase in their valuation. And this is, again, a very small percentage. Now I'm going to talk about the capital projects. In terms of capital investment this year, or I should say in the year 2021, the plan is to spend approximately $12.6 million on total investment. So here you see some of the main items, and I'll go through them. I'll go through them in a bit more detail, but you have the sewer sleeving, road resurfacing, traffic lights, and LED street lights. And just to mention, we have done over 500 lights so far this year that have converted to LED. And the goal in the next few years is to hit, we have approximately 3,000 street lights in all of Côte Saint-Luc. So when this project is done, we'll have converted 3,000 street lights. So every single street light in Côte Saint-Luc will be converted to LED. Not only will we save money, it'll be more environmentally friendly, and it'll also be a brighter light and make it safer for residents, and hopefully less light going up in the sky. I was, just to go off on a quick tangent, I was outside trying to see the overlap of Jupiter and Saturn, which is tonight, although it's a little bit foggy and cloudy, so it's hard to see. But for those that are stargazers, when the lights will be adjusted, it'll be actually easier to see the stars because the lights will not be shining up as much, they'll be shining more down. Parks and public spaces, renovation to public works yards, some building envelopes, and replenishment of the public works fleet. And we'll go through these in a bit more detail. So we'll start with water infrastructure. So first, we finalized the tech grant for 2019 to 2023 just recently on December 14th. So what this grant does is it enables the city of Côte Saint-Luc to get approximately $12 million. So what it means is we have to spend an additional $12 million ourselves. So in effect, we're going to be doing the equivalent of about $24 million worth of projects at a cost of the city or city taxpayers of only $12 million. And the rest of that will come from the federal and provincial government. And these are funded through the gas tax that residents pay when they fill up, that all residents across the country pay when they fill up their car with gas. The priority in terms of the water infrastructure this year is rainwater sewer, or the pluvial sewer system, and that's scheduled to be done in 2021. And again, the process is where a sleeve is inserted inside the pipe. What the sleeve does is it prevents the pipe from leaking. And we're also going to be doing some of the some planning for additional water and sewer work that will be done in 2022. And there's also funds for pneumatic excavation, and this enables us to determine whether the service lines are lead or copper, and we'll be doing an estimated 97 lead service line replacements in the year 2021. So this is just a quick summary on 2 points. One, in terms of the total length of water mains that have been sleeved. So Côte Saint-Luc, we're almost at 24%, so roughly a quarter. So we are one of the highest, if not the highest, if not, we have the highest number in the province in terms of the amount of water mains that we have sleeved over the last few years. And if you look at the number of water main breaks, so as mentioned, in the first few years from 2007 to 2011, we were averaging 28.4 breaks. In the last few years from 2012 to 2020, we're averaging just under 11. So it's a reduction of 61%. And if I compare even the last year, we were at a reduction of 58%. So the numbers are getting better each year. What this means is less residents have to worry about water main breaks, potentially flooding their basements, damaging their cars, their vehicles. And this is partly because of work that the city is doing on its infrastructure. Most people don't notice because it's all done underground, but of course it benefits residents as a whole. In terms of road resurfacing, this is one of the top priorities of the city this year. We have several roads that are on the list. Côte Saint-Luc Road between Prince of Wales and Alpine, Westminster between Mackle and Mather, Davies between Mackle and Sir Winston Churchill, and Weisman between Hartwell and Sabin. Just to mention, there is also, they were on the budget approved last year, but we weren't able to do them this year because of COVID. But there is West Loop between Magnolia and Edinburgh that is still going to be done, and a block of Hudson as well that will be done. In terms of sidewalks, we'll be doing additional sidewalks this year. We've done in the last 5 years 8,260 meters of sidewalk replacement. so averaging about 1,600 meters per year. Additional work on traffic lights. We're continuing with the LED project, so we'll be seeing more lights converted. And one of the ones that we'll be looking at is professional services for the Côte Saint-Luc Road underpass. So if you've noticed in the last few years, we've done an extensive amount of work on the Cavendish underpass and Westminster underpass. The next one to have a facelift is the Côte Saint-Luc Road. This is being done in conjunction with the City of Montreal because this underpass is half on the territory of Côte Saint-Luc, half Montreal, but it's one we're going to be continuing working with them in partnership on. And here you have a map of the roads that have been repaved from 2005 to 2020. The goal over the next few years is to increase the number of roads. As mentioned, the focus the last few years has been more on the piping. My personal belief is it's more important to do the pipes first. Once the pipes are done, then we can focus on the roads, because I hate when I see it being done in other cities where they do the roads and then do the pipes after. And so you just spent all this money on fresh asphalt and then you have to dig it up and make a mess of it. So we're going to hopefully catch up in the next few years. Next one is parks and public spaces. So one of the priorities here is purchasing and planting trees. So in this year, it's going to be, in 2021, it's going to be 100,000, and that will slowly increase to 200,000 in the next few years. We've had to cut down over 1,000 trees because of the emerald ash borer. The city has been trying to catch up. We are still in a tree deficit. So we are continuing to plant and trying to catch up. And we ask for your support. I know sometimes the city will come and plant a tree on your lawn. We hope we can count on your support to do that, because we want to plant as many trees as we can, because keep in mind, we are cutting down trees that are 50 to 100 years old. It takes a while to catch up. Even if we plant a fresh tree, it could take many years for it to grow and be able to produce the same canopy effect, and of course, help environmentally as a mature tree would. In terms of small parks, we have work that is scheduled for Emerald Park and Fletcher Park. There's a basketball court that'll be set up at Rembrandt Park this year. Some more work on Trudeau Park in terms of the baseball field fences and the benches for the players. Kerwin Park as well for the benches for the players, and a new fence for the senior garden. In terms of other building and land improvements, in the library and urban planning, there'll be a replacement of the carpet. After a certain amount of time, the carpet has to be replaced for environmental and for allergy reasons. Electric charging stations for city vehicles, and I'll be talking a bit more about electric vehicles in a moment, but we'll be purchasing 3 chargers. I'm just double checking my notes. 3 chargers for electric vehicles this year. Also, the lifeguard awning area will be replaced. So this is so the lifeguards are protected from the sun. In terms of building envelopes, we've been doing a lot, of course, at City Hall, at the City Hall Library Complex. In the upcoming year, it'll be the Arena and Singerman Park Chalet, where we'll be making adjustments to the building envelope, to the bricks. Public Works yard renovations will be done in the next year, and we'll be looking at professional services for the building envelope for the Public Works yards, because there too we've seen some weak points that need to be addressed, and some repairs to the roof of the Aquatic and Community Center. In terms of vehicles, so you can see some of the vehicles that are going to be replaced this year, but just to highlight, the public security vehicles will be replaced, and for the first time we'll be purchasing electric vehicles for public security. I remember several years ago we purchased the first Subaru. It was a partial zero emission vehicle, PZEV, that was a highlight at the time. Now, of course, there's electric vehicles, and we know even though there's a slightly higher cost for purchasing in terms of maintenance, in terms of energy use, it's much less. And of course, it's not only more energy efficient, but there's a return on investment as well in the long term. Oh, and just to mention, there's also a Zamboni ice laser machine. This is to not to replace the Zamboni, but to assist the Zamboni in terms of leveling the ice and making sure that the ice is proper for those that are skating. In terms of, these are some miscellaneous items. Most of these are purchased through the working fund, so access control and security camera system. So this is for security for our buildings, for staff and let's say to access and exit the building using a key or key fob system. We're increasing the number of cameras or replacing some of the older cameras. Computers, every year we replace a certain number of computers as they age out. Again, as well, the furniture in the library after a certain number of years needs to be replaced. So for the ACC, some of the the blinds need to be replaced so that they're automatic and are not damaged by people using them as much. So this will be done as well. For the outdoor pool starting blocks, so that competitions can be done. One of the things we did last year when the pool was renovated is we actually made one of the sections a little bit deeper so that we could have swim competitions there in the outdoor pool as well. So there'll be starting blocks that'll be added. Mobile shelving for the archives. This allows us to be more efficient. Public security, the SECI electronic ticket system. Right now the tickets are still being done on paper. So this will be more, bring us more to the 21st century as is done in the City of Montreal. And for Public Works, a mobile unit for office use so that we have a better system for some of the new managers that are, or new administration hired to assist in Public Works. So here we have the 3-year summary. So you could see for 2021, it's approximately $12 million in total. And you'll see on the next page, much of that is covered through grants and for the next year as well. For 2023, we're estimated about $10 million, but again, 2022 and 23 are still subject to change. So this includes all the different elements. So in terms of the bottom line for 2021, when you factor in the different sources of financing and the main one, so if you add up the lines from the federal provincial grant, it's about $12 million, which is from the tech grant. The other sources of funding include the working fund. It includes the surplus sometimes when we have extra funding in an old bylaw. So it's about $6 million next year as well. For 2023, it's a little bit higher, but that's still subject to change. And we also hope in 2023, there'll be additional grants as well. So we believe that number will come down and that'll be reviewed in the next few years. And I believe that's it. I think I went a few minutes long, but I want to make sure to cover all the key points. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Well, thank you, Councillor Erdely. That was an excellent presentation. And once again, thank you to our treasurer, Angela Marino, and all the directors who worked hard this year to manage funds and also to work towards a balanced budget for the upcoming year. So no, it's exciting. We're still waiting to hear some questions if they have any, but whether you do or not, there will be a second question period that will be opened up for the next meeting, which is a separate link. Not the link that you're on now. You're going to have to go to the same place where you joined this meeting and see the link to the 7 p.m. meeting, which also has a question period at the beginning. So, Maître Prévost, do we have any questions?
Yes, we do have a question that just came in. I'm just going to look at the YouTube chat to make sure I have all the details. Okay, so the question is from Allison Weinberger. No major renovations seem to be budgeted for in Kerwin Park. Are we to understand from this that District 5 residents will continue to have to wait for improvements to this park?
So, Councillor Erdely, do you want to?
So let me, maybe I'll explain first. So just to clarify, the budget that's adopted tonight are for items that are funded from that are 2021 projects. So as I probably should have mentioned Kerwin Park, but as I gave the example with West Luke and Hudson, for example, so West Luke and Hudson are not actually on the PowerPoint because they were approved last year. With regard to Kerwin Park, there is a budget of approximately $3 million that has been allocated for Kerwin Park. At this point, we are waiting on a grant from the provincial government. We were hoping to find out by the end of December, but it seems from what I'm hearing that we're only going to find out in January, unless Councillor Gajewski has any more news on that. But all that to say, Kerwin Park is definitely still moving forward, but right now we're waiting to see, because if I understand correctly, there's, let's say, two versions of how it could come out, depending on whether we get this grant from the provincial, additional grant from the provincial government, that it could be a larger or slightly larger or smaller scale project. So Councillor Gajewski, is there any news on that grant, or we'll have to wait till January?
We had followed up about 2 weeks ago, because originally we were supposed to hear back before the end of the year from the ministry, but we heard that we're going to hear in January on the results of the grant. So that'll determine whether Kerwin is tendered again for 2021. And if we don't get the grant, then we're going to reevaluate, probably have to go back to professional services and do a smaller chalet. And then we'll address incorporating Kerwin Park in a future project that includes the Côte Saint-Luc Tennis Club, but that's a whole other discussion. So January for the grant. Kerwin Park is actually in the 2019 budget, if I'm not mistaken. So it will be moving forward, and I hope we've answered Allison's question appropriately. And again, if she has any questions for that, she can follow up with me afterwards. We're in contact.
Right.
Thank you.
So we're hoping for that grant to come through, but if it doesn't, we do have $2.5 million put aside for Kerwin. So we're going to go ahead with a project. We just want it to be a bigger one. So we're very hopeful that the grant will come through and we can do something really amazing. $2.5 million is great, but if we could get a couple million more, then we have great plans how we can spend that money. We spend a lot of time with the public getting their thoughts of what they would like there, and we want to be able to do it all. Any other questions?
For the moment, that's the only question that we received.
Okay, so we're going to go for the adoption of the budget and then go into another meeting with more questions if needed, which would be on the special meeting for setting the rates and transfer duties, which will be at, well, 7 o'clock already, but it will be right after this meeting. So do I have someone to move the adoption of the budget? Councillor Erdely.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Be it resolved that Côte Saint-Luc City Council hereby adopts the 2021 operating budget as follows. Revenues of $75,268,350. Expenses and appropriations of $75,268,350 for a balanced budget. And hereby next to the minutes to form an integral part of said document entitled Appendix 1.
Moved by Councillor Erdely, seconded by Councillor Cohen. Any discussion? All in favor? Anybody opposed? It's carried unanimously, and we go to the next item, which is Councillor Erdely.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Be it resolved that Côte Saint-Luc City Council hereby accepts and adopts the 3-year capital expenditure plan for the 2021, 2022, and 2023 years, totaling $33,879,910 plus applicable taxes, hereby annexed to the minutes to form an integral part of said document entitled Appendix 2.
So moved by Councillor Erdely, seconded by Councillor Torgman. Any discussion? Any discussion? Councillor Burku. Councillor Burku has discussion, and you will too, of course. Councillor Burku, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to take this opportunity to thank Councillor Erdely for being a true leader on this dossier. It's a tremendous amount of work that he's invested along with Angelo Marino in preparing all the documentation in support of this budget and in support of the presentation. And we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burku. Absolutely. You've done an amazing job as always, Councillor Erdely. Councillor Cohen.
I want to echo the sentence. First of all, Councillor Erdely, outstanding job. You can tell he's an educator. I would have loved to have been his student. I'm glad I worked with him for many years. You presented that beautifully, and that's why your students loved you. This time you have over 30,000 students in Côte Saint-Luc, and they're all going to watch this on video. Angelo Marino, I worked with him for many years at the school board. I worked with him for many years at the city. He and his department deserve a major tip of the cap. This was not an easy year. And I have to give our senior management from Tanya, Nadia, Jonathan, and everybody every single staff person. They all worked as a real team. They really provided us with information. During the pandemic, we were meeting more than once a week, especially in the spring and the summer. And we were kept abreast of all of this. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your leadership on this dossier. We really did well under the circumstances. So hats off to everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Cohen. Any other discussion? Councillor Italy.
So just wanted to mention one final point on this, that even though we adopt this budget now and of course plan to do these different projects, for each project, when it comes time, we'll be adopting it individually. So for each of these projects, whether it be road repaving, will be presented, the council will be presented and we'll be adopting publicly to approve each one individually. And if one, of course, comes in too expensive, where it's not within our budget, of course, we have the right to not approve it. So that'll be done over the next few months.
Thank you, Councillor Italy. So before we go, we had this mover and seconder, but before we go to the final vote, I just wanted to say that, you know, our directors team is basically, they are long-term public servants who we're blessed to have had serving our community for many, many years. And they understand the needs of the residents of Côte Saint-Luc, the wishes of the elected officials, and they're exceptional. And we're blessed to have you all. So thank you to our management team, directors who have been with us for so many years. And we look forward to having you for many, many more years to come. You're great leaders in helping us go in the right direction for the city of Côte Saint-Luc. So thank you for all your great work. And to the council, thank you for what we had to go through this year together as a team, based on each of your portfolios and working together on all the issues related to COVID-19. I think we did the best to balance the safety and health of the residents and to ensure that we provide them with quality of life and address their mental health as well as their physical well-being. And we're going to continue to do that. We're going to continue to do that this year with this budget and with our plans, coming up with new ways that we can stay connected, that we can work with individuals through new programming, through partnering with religious institutions and other organizations to make sure that everybody knows that if they have a certain need in Côte Saint-Luc, that we are here. We're at the municipal level. We are here for you. And if we can't provide the service, we'll know exactly where to partner, who we're partnering with, that we can send you to for support, whether it's whether it's recreational or emotional. We want to be there for you. So thank you to our staff, to our elected officials, and it's moved and seconded. So I'll call for all in favor. No one's opposed, so it's carried unanimously. And then I'll call for adjournment, and we will go back to, if you're looking for the link to get into the next meeting, it's at cotesaintluc.org/council meetings, and you can click right onto the next link and we'll meet you there in a minute. But I'll call for adjournment. Councillor.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Torgman, seconded by Councillor Sabag, all in favor. We're adjourned. We'll see you on the other side.